Canada's new immigration rules are now in effect. These rules began on May 28, 2025, and they affect temporary residents in Canada. This group includes workers, students, and also visitors. The main aim is to change status extension processes. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC, wants to stop incomplete placeholder applications. These applications were sometimes submitted just to gain more time. This is a key update for people in Canada temporarily, impacting how they stay. The government has clear reasons for these changes. IRCC wants to make the immigration processing system better. They aim for a smoother and more efficient way to handle applications. These new rules also stop the automatic continuation of status. This used to happen if an initial application was refused. Now, the process for extending a stay will be much clearer. Immigration officers will have more consistent guidelines to follow. This helps everyone understand all the requirements much better. However, some important things about maintaining status have not changed. The most basic rule for temporary residents is still the same. If you are a temporary resident, you can apply to extend your stay. You must always submit this application before your current status expires. If you follow this rule, you can legally stay in Canada. You are permitted to remain here while IRCC processes your application. This well-known condition is called having maintained status. This provides important stability and peace of mind for many applicants. There is another smaller update that temporary residents should note. This update is part of the new instructions from IRCC. The department has removed a section regarding applying at a port of entry. This section was about getting work permits or study permits upon arrival. This change is in line with a ban on a practice called flagpoling. Flagpoling is when individuals briefly leave Canada and re-enter. They did this to try and get faster immigration services at the border. These measures show IRCC is tightening various application routes for efficiency. Before the new rules started on May 28, 2025, the system was different. Some temporary residents in Canada used a particular strategy. They would submit an application to extend their temporary stay. Sometimes this application was not fully complete when they sent it. It might have been missing some required documents or information. These were often known as placeholder applications by applicants. The main reason for doing this was to keep their legal status in Canada. This practice allowed them to stay longer, even with an incomplete initial file. What happened if this first, perhaps incomplete application was refused? Under the old system, there was often more flexibility for applicants. Frequently, the person's temporary status in Canada was still maintained. This maintained status could continue until a decision was made on a second application. If they submitted a second application after their original status had expired, they could usually stay. However, if they were a worker, their permission to work would stop. This work stoppage was from the date the first application was refused. They could only start working again if the second application was finally approved. The new rules are now much stricter for incomplete applications. Imagine you submit an application before your current status expires, but IRCC later finds it incomplete and decides to return it to you. Or perhaps IRCC refuses the application for other reasons. If this decision from IRCC comes after your original status has already expired, you lose maintained status. This is a very significant change that everyone must understand clearly. It means you are no longer legally allowed to stay in Canada. This can create a very difficult and uncertain situation for many people. What are the immediate results of this important new rule? If you are a worker or a student, you must stop your main activities. You must stop working at your job immediately. You must also stop attending your classes or studies immediately. You cannot simply resume these activities as before. The only way to start working or studying again is if your status is officially restored. This restoration must come from IRCC through a separate application process. This can cause serious disruptions to people's lives and plans. Let us consider carefully what happens with refused applications now. Suppose your first application to extend your temporary stay is refused, or it is rejected by IRCC because it was found to be incomplete. Then you decide that you want to submit a second application. If you submit this second application after your original status has already expired, the new rules are very tough. Under these new regulations, you will automatically lose your temporary status in Canada. This is a critical point for all temporary residents to remember well. Losing status has significant implications for your ability to remain in Canada. What is the definite fate of that second application you submitted after expiry? Under these new IRCC regulations, it will be automatically refused. Immigration officers will not process this second application any further. This means the applicant is then considered to be out of status. Being out of status in Canada has very serious consequences. If the person is eligible, they will then need to apply for restoration. Restoration of status is a separate process with its own specific requirements. It also has strict timelines that must be met by the applicant. However, there is a different scenario that can lead to a better outcome. What if your first extension application is refused or rejected as incomplete, but you are able to quickly prepare and submit a second complete application? And crucially, you submit this second, well-prepared application before your original status expires. In this particular situation, you will successfully maintain your status in Canada. You can legally remain in the country while IRCC processes your second application. This status continues for the duration of the processing period. This clearly highlights how vital correct timing and application completeness now are. If your temporary status in Canada expires, what can you possibly do? And what if your application to extend it has been refused by IRCC? You might be able to apply for something called restoration of status. This is a specific type of application to try and get your temporary status back. However, it is very important to know that not everyone is eligible. There are strict conditions that you must meet to apply for restoration. There is also a limited time window in which you must submit this application. This is often the last available option for those who have lost their status. To apply for restoration of your status, you must meet several key requirements. First, you must submit your restoration application within 90 days of losing your status. This 90-day period is a very strict deadline, so act quickly. Second, you usually must apply to restore the same type of status you lost. For example, if you were a student, you apply to restore your student status. There is an exception. Workers or students can apply to restore their status and remain as a visitor. You must also remain physically present in Canada while waiting for a decision, and you must continue to meet general temporary resident requirements. Another very important rule for restoration applies specifically to work and study. If you lost your status as a worker or as a student in Canada, you must stop these activities. You must stop working at your job immediately and without delay. You must also stop studying at your school or institution immediately. This is required from the exact moment you officially lose your status. You cannot resume working or studying until and only if your status is successfully restored by IRCC. Not following this rule can lead to more serious immigration problems down the road. It could negatively affect any future applications you make to IRCC. So what is the best advice for temporary residents in Canada now? The most important thing you can do is to plan very carefully. Plan your status extensions well in advance of any expiry dates on your documents. Do not wait until the last minute to start preparing your application. Gather all the necessary documents and information early. Make absolutely sure that your application is complete and accurate before submitting it. Submit this complete application to IRCC before your current status expires. This is the surest way to avoid problems under these new, stricter rules. These new rules from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada are significant. It is now more important than ever to submit timely and complete applications. Failing to do so can easily lead to losing your legal status in Canada. This can severely disrupt your life, your work, or your studies and plans. If your application is refused, or if you cannot submit it on time, it is wise to seek help. You should consider getting professional legal advice as soon as possible. An immigration lawyer or a registered immigration consultant can provide guidance. They can help you understand your options, including restoration if applicable,